One of the most amazing aspects to Breath of the Wild was just how many different applications came from the 4 main core Sheikah Slate abilities. Over the years, players came up with so many different ways to use these abilities. Some of those ways may not have even been intended by the developers. And with this in mind, it looks like the Zelda team developed new abilities for Tears of the Kingdom that seem largely limited just by our creativity. And as Mr. Eiji Aonuma alluded to in the gameplay demonstration, our imagination could take these abilities in a lot of different ways than what they showed in the demonstration. So it seems there's a lot more to these 4 core abilities for Link than what they've shown. What more can we do with these abilities? And is there more beyond just the 4 abilities? Well, that's what we're talking about today.
Hey, listen!
Welcome everyone, this is Andre's Restart, and today we're talking about what more there is to Link's abilities in Tears of the Kingdom. But before we jump into things, let me point out that we are aiming to hit 25,000 subscribers by the time Tears of the Kingdom comes out on May 12th. So if you enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the notification bell, because then we might just make it. Now before we get into what more there may be to the 4 main abilities in Tears of the Kingdom, let's talk about how there might be more than just 4 abilities. First off, I don't think it should come as too much of a surprise because in Breath of the Wild, there were more than 4 abilities. And we did obtain some different power-ups throughout the adventure in Breath of the Wild. But going beyond that, when we take a look at the demonstration, something that I found interesting is that they never showed the transition between the abilities. They made sure to cut the footage in a way where we would never see that transitional screen like how we do in Breath of the Wild, where we can see other slots for more abilities. They may have been wanting to hide if there are more abilities in Tears of the Kingdom. But it does look like we have some pretty solid evidence suggesting that there are. So, in both the Tears of the Kingdom OLED and the Collector's Edition, we are seeing promotional material suggesting that there are more abilities. Because, with the 4 main abilities, only one of them, Recall, is depicted with a kanji. And we have seen different kanji in the different promotional material for Tears of the Kingdom. This suggests that kanji related ability Recall isn't the only one, there may be more like it. And this becomes a little bit more interesting when you consider that of the 4 abilities, Recall is the only one that glows with a gold-like color. The other 3 glow with a green-like color along with the hand. So there may be more gold-like abilities, maybe goddess abilities, and also, who's to say there can't also be some new Zonai abilities as well? We don't know what the limit is, but some have speculated that maybe there are 4 total green abilities and 4 total gold abilities. We shall see. That all said, even if there aren't more abilities, maybe the 4 main abilities can be upgraded in some way. That was also possible for both Stasis and the bombs in Breath of the Wild. But let's now move on to these 4 abilities because I do think there's a lot here that we may not have realized. So first, Ascend. What's interesting about Ascend is that we understand that it gives us the option to dive upwards through roofs and ceilings and appearing above them. So say we're in a cavern or cave and it's the underside of a mountain, we can use Ascend to shoot upwards to the top of the mountain. Or if there's a big structure, the same would apply. And that's the obvious application for Ascend, but I think there's a bit more to it than that. So something we've talked about in previous videos is that when you're diving down or in the air, the ability fades out. However, when we are underwater, we've seen that the ability lights up again. So this suggests that the game understands the surface of the water as a ceiling or roof that we can ascend through. And what this might mean is either A, if we're in some sort of cave or area below a body of water, say like a sky island, we can ascend through all the way through the terrain and the body of water to the very surface, or if we are in a body of water, we can use Ascend to get to the very top of that. Both might be possible, or just one, and it's also possible the ability may simply fail if we try to use it even though it is lit up, but I think because it's lit up, it does suggest that we can do something with it at one point or another. However, some have tried to counter this idea by talking about how the Ascend ability is also lit up when we're traversing the Sky Islands and there is no ceiling or roof apparent. But I've interpreted that a bit differently. So 1, we don't know what the limit to ascend is. It's possible there could be sky islands or terrain directly above Link during that footage that we can't see, and he can simply ascend up to them. Of course, we don't know what the limit is, so it's hard to say for sure, but it's also possible it might do something else. So something interesting about Ascend is that it gives us the ability to ascend quite quickly, and it kind of solves a bit of the problem we saw in Breath of the Wild where climbing took a bit longer than we would have wanted, and if it was raining, we wouldn't even have the option to climb. So Ascend remedies that in a bit of a way, but something we had in Breath of the Wild that also remedied upwards exploration a bit was Revali's Gale. It was a big jump upward that allowed us to climb more quickly or fly to different locations with the paraglider. So what if Ascend is meant to replace Revali's Gale, and not only does it allow us to ascend through terrain, but also function as a big jump upwards? So maybe those parts where Link is running around and the abilities lit up, maybe we can simply use Ascend as a big jump like Revali's Gale. This is just a possibility. It's possible that what we've seen with Ascend is all we can do, but let's also remind ourselves that it may be an ability that we can upgrade later down the road that may give us an option like Revali's Gale, or perhaps to do more underwater. Moving on to another ability though, let's talk about Ultrahand. So Ultrahand gives us the option to construct all sorts of things, which has a myriad of applications. In terms of limitations, all we've noticed is that there is this battery limit when we're activating different devices that we build. And it seems like this battery length is related to the amount of green little bottles or vials that Link has on his side. Many have been speculating that since we only see one on Link's person in the gameplay demonstration, that's why we can only see the 3 little bars for a battery. But later on to the game, as we've seen with different pieces of footage, we have more of those little bottles, so we can go further with some different devices, which is why we've seen some footage where Link can actually use a flying craft. But I think there could be more to Ultrahand than just building things. Similar to how Ascend may be sort of replacing Revali's Gale, I feel that Ultrahand could also be replacing Magnesis. So Magnesis allowed us to grab different metal objects, not to just move them around to give us more options to explore, but also as both offensive and defensive options. We could pull a metal box to protect ourselves, or use that same metal box as a weapon by pushing it outwards and swinging it in ways to hit enemies. Is it not possible we can do the same with Ultrahand? We are controlling items in a similar way as we did with Magnesis. Going beyond even that though, we've seen a number of objects that glow orange when we enter the Ultrahand state. Some of these objects are large platforms or chunks of island off in the distance. The suggestion being that we can manipulate these however we choose, further supporting this idea we've had that the world in Tears of the Kingdom is going to be very customizable. A lot of this will come down to our own creativity. But with customization in mind, let's move on to the next ability, Fuse. So Fuse also has a myriad of potential applications. We've seen that we can use Fuse to save items that are about to break, make them more durable and more powerful. But we've also seen some evidence suggesting that we might be able to fuse more than once. With this shot right here, we already have a fused item with the option to fuse again. So as we fuse, weapons can potentially gain more power, more durability, but I've personally speculated that the more fused an item is, there may come a time when you may choose to throw the item because it's about to break and maybe you've reached your fuse limit, because I do imagine they have to limit it at some point or another, and when you do that throw, the critical damage will be far more than in Breath of the Wild because it's a fused item that is more than just one weapon. But going beyond offensive options, we've seen with the bow that there's a myriad of applications for fuse, like with an eyeball, when you attach it, the eyeball sees and it turns an arrow into a homing weapon. There are so many items with so many potential applications. They showed that we can attach a Korok leaf, but we don't know what we can do with that. I'm speculating that it might function as a bit of a shield. And what's interesting about this is that similar to how the homing arrow makes it easier for those who aren't good at aiming, this Korok leaf may function as a shield for those who may not be able to aim very quickly. So I remember in Breath of the Wild, there were times when I would be aiming at a Bokoblin, and the Bokoblin would get me before I could lock down my aim. Maybe use the Korok leaf as a shield so you can aim at a Bokoblin or other enemies before they get to you. We can't normally hold the shield while using the bow, so this might be an alternative defensive option. And really, when we think about it, we don't have the Sheikah Slate abilities in Tears of the Kingdom. All the environmental puzzles, the shrine replacements, and potential dungeons are going to have new puzzles built with these new abilities in mind that have even more creative options than what it seems like we got in Breath of the Wild with the Sheikah ones. So the amount of applications for Fuse could become mind-boggling. But perhaps what is the most mind-boggling ability to me is Recall. So what I understand of Recall is that we take objects and we reverse their position in time. Some have argued that we're simply reversing the kinetic energy, but I believe it's more related to reversing the time itself of that item. One reason is because when we do, the environment around us turns black and white, which in general is a motif for time in some way. But more so because we've seen that Link is actually using the Recall ability because we now have a match for the rune on Link's hand during that little cutscene where he's holding the Master Sword and it's glowing. And when we consider the Master Sword is destroyed and he's using Recall, why would he be doing that? There isn't any sort of kinetic energy there. The sword wasn't falling. Link pulled it out of his sheath. This suggests that he's doing something else with it. And considering how it already seems like it may be reversing time with the fallen objects from the sky or that metal spiked ball, Link may be trying to use Recall to reverse the time of the Master Sword, to reverse or eliminate the history where it was damaged. So throughout the game, Link may be using Recall to reverse its history, and there may be more applications to Recall here. Since we're seeing that Link may be using Recall to restore the sword, we might be able to do more. For example, we've seen a lot of ruins in the Sky Islands. Some of these ruins appear to be old constructs. What if we can use Recall or an upgraded version of Recall at some point in the game to reverse the history or decay of these constructs so they become living constructs again and we can communicate with them or battle with them in some way, maybe obtain a rare item. This wouldn't be too different from what we did in Skyward Sword, where we would take the time shift stones and go back to a time where environments and the ancient robots would come back to life. Many have drawn comparisons to the ancient robots and the constructs. It wouldn't surprise me if we could do something like this with Recall. But on the note of reversing the environment, what if Recall can be taken even further? There's been a lot of speculation that there's going to be this massive restoration effort in Tears of the Kingdom. Considering that we have this building ability and that we've seen different things being built back up, maybe Recall could play a role here. There's lots of ruins on the surface of Hyrule, where there's this ancient Hyrule with this rich history that we have yet to really explore. What if Recall can be used on a larger scale and we can restore different important locations throughout the history of Hyrule, for example, Lon Lon Ranch or Castle Town? I think Recall could have this level of potential, and that is a very exciting prospect. But going beyond these four abilities, we've seen a patent, and this patent I saw thanks to Zelda Lore on Twitter, so I'll be linking that in the description below. But we've seen a patent where it looks like Link can create portals, kind of like in the game Portal, and you can have two different points that you can warp between seamlessly. I don't know if this will be in the game. We should keep in mind that patents don't always materialize into actual gameplay or systems or whatever they're about, but it's possible. We've seen other patents that have materialized, like the Ascend ability, so this might be another ability. And really, I still think I'm probably just scratching the surface with some of the applications and options we may have in Tears of the Kingdom. What have you realized with the potential abilities of Link in Tears of the Kingdom? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways everyone, this is Andreas Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.